All right, what's going on? We've got some Friday college basketball. I think that it's a decent slate. Hopefully, you will as well. We'll start off with the 6 o'clock game. We got Stony Brook probably coming off their best performance of the year versus a D1 opponent going up against Bryant at Bryant's building. Now, for Bryant and Stony Brook, I think that the biggest thing that stands out to me is don't look at Brian's first half numbers and take a lot into that because where was their home game that they played? What happened in that home game? Yeah, they fucking played at home versus what's it called? Versus Brown, and Brown fucked them right in the mouth. Well, the good thing about these two opponents is that they have that common opponent in Brown in handy. And I think that when I look at Bryant, you know, scoring more than 30 points in the first half is key for them. We've seen them at times in the year be able to eclipse 37 or more. So something like that is going to have to happen. We have seen this Bryant team do a good job, at least in first halves against some lower tier opponents. This would qualify as one of them. And when I look at Stony Brook from a personnel perspective, if they don't have Aaron Clark in the lineup, that takes away a lot of the allure for me with them. And getting him back last game against Yale gives me a lot more confidence because Tyler Stevenson Moore's had to do a lot because Kenny Sarvan and Frankie Pacelli haven't been fantastic. But now when you're working Aaron Clark back in, he's a bulldog. I watched him a lot at Sacred Heart. He is a shot maker and a shot taker. So I think that this Stony Brook team may be able to give Bryant a bit more of a game than a lot of us are anticipating. I think that when you look at how Bryant is playing, they're playing fast, but they seem to be playing out of control, and it's a lot of me basketball. It's not sharing the basketball. So I don't really want to be backing Bryant at this number, even though this is most likely a 15-point or more win for them. I think that the easiest way to approach this game is to be looking at is to be looking at what some of the players can do. And when you look at Charles Pride, when you look at Earl Timberlake for Bryant, what do you think about them? What do you think that their game plan offensively is whenever they're in transition or they're in the half court? It's to get to the rim, get a high percentage look, try to get to the free throw line. And that's what I think that is the best edge in this game. Both these players are capable of scoring 15 points. And to me, taking Charles Pride over 14 and a half points minus 113 and taking Earl Timberlake over 13 and a half points minus 113 are two plays that have value to me. We've seen them eclipse that number in about half or 60% of their games. And as long as Sharif Gross Bullock doesn't hog the ball and freaking eat up all those attempts, I just think that your best offense is going to come from those two guys rather than guys like Doug Eddard or Chauncey Hawkins or anybody else on that backcourt. So I'm not in love with the number. I think that 71 in the first half, if Stony Brook is going to be in it, then that number's going under. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Bryant cover the 7 points on the first half, at least early, and then you see Stony Brook play a tale of two halves. What they did against Yale, their efficiency, their freaking ability to knock down the three is something that we've seen glimpses of, but not against D1 competition. So for them to knock down 11 threes where I more project them around 5 to 6 is a big step up in production. I don't think it happens tonight. So call me crazy, but I lean towards Bryant first half. I like Bryant and Stony Brook first half under, and I like the two players on Bryant to be able to score some points for them. So I'm going to move on from there. I guess the next game that I'll talk about will be Queens and High Point. Listen, with Queens College, not Queen's University. That's in Windsor, Ontario. The biggest issue for Queens is about taking care of the basketball in the half court. This is a bit of a sloppy team, and even though they are undersized, they do create a lot of second chance opportunities for themselves. Getting to the rim, running as often as you can is what's going to help Queens stay in this game tonight. Because when I watch how they play defense, you can back them down very often. You can get close and high percentage looks pretty much whenever you want. Their 3-point defense is good for closing out, but at the end of the day, when I'm talking about betting on Queens College in the second half, I worry about their best player not being able to take care of business at the free throw line. And when Kenny Dye has been there 39 times and doesn't have at least 30 makes, that's a problem for me. This is a good shooting team. They take smart shots. They take good shots. But if you don't have all three levels clicking in the second half in that last 5 minutes, that's probably going to be tight. I worry about Queens being able to hold on to any lead that they build in the first half. When I look at some of these numbers for High Point, even though it's a small sample size, High Point's still been able to put up 40 plus points in the first half at home, 44 points overall in their last 3 games and 39 on the season. Those are some heavy numbers that you're going to have to stop. And regardless of where this program came from last year, they're still going up against a very high tempo, very rim oriented offense that gets to the free throw line galore. So if you get to the free throw line in your High Point and you get there 30 times in the game and you only make 20 of them, I still think that's a bit of a win. The way that High Point hurts themselves is not being aggressive defensively, trying to bring those traps in the half court, extending some ball pressure, allowing your opponent, which could be to the benefit of Queens College, to get on the offensive glass. But if you think that you're going to go 3-point happy versus this High Point defense, that's the one area that we've seen them be able to lock down no matter what kind of opponent they're playing or where they're playing. So when you can go into UNLV, have the lead for the first half, and then still be able to keep that team 7 for 27 from 3, that's a win to me. And that's a sign of some defensive growth. Now, when John Michael Wright left this team, they left a big void. But Zach Austin has definitely filled that void. He's an explosive 3-level scorer. Jaden House has been able to really up his production and his shot attempts, which has been great. And then you just have a whole bunch of guys that are experienced in this system, like Brian Randleman and Bryson Childress, and you got guys that can bring some size, like freaking Ahmad Harvey and Alex Holt. So I think High Point, if they have to slow this game down at times, I can really see that working to their benefit. And when it comes to them being able to score with their back to the basket and get into the free throw line, I can deal with a couple misses because of the high volume that they shoot there. So for me, I think that this is one of the tales of two halves. High Point has really played with fire in a lot of games when they had bigger leads. And I point out to the game against North Florida where they had to come back. I point out to the game against Tennessee State where they let them come back a little, So I definitely think that this is a game that you could play a tale of two halves. Queens College in the first half, High Point full game, because I've watched Queens College and this is a much stiffer test for them from all aspects than they had against teams like Morgan State and Green Bay. So for me, this is definitely split action, but I do think that there is value on High Point's first half team total. And if Queens College is going to be able to keep this competitive and maybe go into halftime with a lead, then their team total in the first half would also be something that you should look at, because they averaged 34.5 points on the road, 36 over the last 3, and 35.5 overall. So not 2.5 points of value, but you rarely get that on a first half team total. All right. Let's talk about the next game that is on the slate. Okay, this is a real ass chewer of a game in Grambling and Vandy. just because, Grambling is a team that has major troubles at the free throw line, but in the first half, that probably isn't really going to come back to haunt them. What I like about Grambling is that they win with defense. They compete with defense, making you take difficult shots, taking the ball away from you in the half court, really closing out and taking away some of those 3-point looks that you're going to rely on. And if they can do a good job of stopping some of the rim penetration from guys like Jordan Wright and Miles Stute, then they're going to be able to stay in this first half early. Now, I think that this is one of the stiffest, this is one of the toughest opponents outside of the other Pac-12 teams that they've played, but I'm not really sold on this Vandy team. I think that they're going to have a major matchup problem having to deal with some of the guys on this roster. When you look at their backcourt with freaking Shundarius Coward and Tremichael Moton, now you're not getting a ton of production from the 3-point line, but you're getting guys that are trying to get to the rim, forcing the refs to make a decision on if this is a foul or if this is a charge. And that's the type of aggressive guard play you need to keep on keeping on in a game versus a Power 5 team. Now, from a wing perspective, I think that this is where Grambling can do their best work offensively, is get Carter Air, Gordon, and Cameron Christian the ball as often as you can, let them hit those mid-range jumpers, and I just think that at the end of the day, if Grambling is going to stay in this game, it's going to be for one half, not for the full game, in my opinion. Now, if Grambling is going to stay in this first half and make it competitive, then they are going to have to keep this under. So when I see 65 or 64 and a half, if you want to double up, that's the way to double up, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens. I think that it's a real interesting game for Vandy. Vandy on paper should win this game by 20, but we've seen on paper usually doesn't work out and come to fruition. Plus, Vandy's a team that's in turmoil right now. Can't get to the free throw line. When they get to the free throw line, they're going 1 for 2 or missing the front end 1-and-1s. And they just don't have that dominant score outside of Miles Stute from the 3-point line. So as much as it's been a benefit to have the size and skill of Melora Brown and Liam Robbins, I just don't see it really helping them in this game today. So they may win the game. They may not embarrass themselves. But when you shoot 62% from the free throw line, 34% from the 3-point line, and under 50% from the field, and you're an SEC team, that's problematic. So your small guards and Trey Thomas and Ezra Manjun, I don't know if they're going to be able to succeed in this game. So I'll ride the dog and I'll ride the first half under early. Now, going to the next game is a real interesting one to me because it's with Central Connecticut State, and I'm a big fan of NEC. I enjoy watching the style of basketball that they play. And Central Connecticut State is one of these teams that you look on paper, you look at the numbers, and you're like, ew, 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 ew. Gross, 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 gross. Well, I think that's probably a fair assessment, Coming into the season, I felt that there was a lot of potential looking at Kellen Amos coming in, Nigel Scantlebury back for another season, another year of Andre Snooty, and of course, looking at the size that you had with guys like Jaden Brown, you thought that there was going to be better freaking production coming out of this team, but they're not efficient. They're not effective from the 3-point line. The only person that you can really count on to get to the free throw line and make free throws in the second half of a game is Scantlebury. And, as great as he's been defensively on the ball, creating steals, really forcing the other team's point guard to rush what he's doing, he's not getting enough complimentary scoring from everybody else on this roster. And I could call anybody out that you can name. And I could be like, oh, in this game, you did this. In this game, you did that. So for me, I don't see Central Connecticut State having a lot of value. Their first half numbers have not been good. They're not winning first halves at home. They're not winning first halves overall. Their first half margins are freaking more than 2 3-point buckets. Now, scoring wise, they have scored close to 30 points in the first half at home, but they haven't done it overall. And they haven't done it on the road. or in the last 3. So I'm not into that. That really doesn't help sell me on Central Connecticut State. But when I look at Dartmouth, my big question with Dartmouth is what's the status of Ryan Cornish? If Cornish isn't in the lineup, how much is that going to hurt this team? Because they do have what's it called? Dusan Niskovich coming back. But every time I bet on Dartmouth and I see Dartmouth do well, it's because Cornish is freaking leading the way. So I'm having a hard time right now getting on this game from a side perspective, but I'm not expecting a high scoring game with two teams that shoot under 65% from the free throw line and under 35% from the 3-point line. So they could surprise me, no doubt. I saw it against Vermont, but it's not something that I'm going to regularly ride. Ryan Cornish makes a big difference. He's a good mid-range scorer. He gets to the free throw line more than anybody else on this team, and he's their best three-point shooter outside of Cade Haskins. So you're asking a lot of Dartmouth, even versus a really piss-poor Central Connecticut State team, if he's on the lineup. So what I'm going to do in this game is I'm going to wait, be patient, and then I'm going to see if Cornish is playing. If Cornish isn't playing, you're probably going to get a better number on the first half and full game. But it's really a coin flip when you take Cornish out of the equation for Dartmouth. All right, let's move on to the next game. I'll try to be less passionate so I talk less about it. And that's Fairleigh Dickinson against Columbia. Now, I'm all about FDU in this game. FDU's press can be very beneficial in this game. I think that the one concern I have is the fact that they had such a flawless, brilliant game against St. Joe's. 22 for 35 inside the arc and 12 for 24 from the 3-point line. They were effective. They were efficient. They were fucking with their eyes open. Now, can they do that 2 games in a row against a Columbia team that if they break your press, they got a bunch of guys that are very good dribble driving guards and they will score buckets. I'm anticipating that because what I want to do is I want to hit this freaking first half over, but you have to be considerate of what the numbers are trying to tell you. Now, when we look at Columbia is not one of these teams that you expect high octane offense from. The numbers are not flattering for them. 27.5 points at home, 21.7 over the last 3, 28.6 overall. Now, they haven't been dominating in first halves or in first halves in general. Now, FDU, on the other hand, is a team that averages 36.9 points per game in the first half overall, 35.5 points over the last 3, and most importantly, 37 on the road. So I do think that FDU's first half team total does have value. I do think that FDU, if they are going to follow the game script of what the stats are saying, that they are going to win this game in the first half and go wire to wire. So I'm just going to freaking ride with what the numbers are saying. I'm going to get myself a piece of that FDU first half team total, and I'm going to fucking rock and roll, I think that this FDU team has very good young talent. And if they get Belligeon back, who didn't play last time out, that's your most senior experienced scoring guard, a guy who has a good IQ, doesn't turn the ball over, crashes the offensive glass, and will make free throws for you in the second half when you need it. Now, don't get me started on these FDU guards, because Ansley Almanor, Grant Singleton, Dimitri Roberts, my God, they are all fucking aces at the free throw line. They are all killer drivers. Like, FDU was one of the biggest question marks coming into the season. You thought that it was going to be Daniel Rodriguez and Joe Munden Jr., Sebastian Lemieux, but those guys have been outplayed by these new kids. So I'm loving it. I think that this is an FDU team that's exciting to watch. And if they can lure Columbia into playing a high-tempo game, I do think that they can score 37 points in the first half. Now, I will say that Pinnacle is definitely aiming and trying to guide us towards betting unders. It could very well turn out to be a 10-point win for FDU in the first half, and it doesn't see 65 points. but I'm hoping that isn't the case, and Columbia can break that press and score some quick buckets. So it should be an exciting game. I look forward to watching it on ESPN Plus. And I'll move on from there because I'm not going to talk about Columbia's roster. De La Rosa has the best hair and the best overall skill. That's about it that I got to say there. All right. Now, this is I would call this a bias game for me because I do find myself becoming more and more of a Fordham fan every day. I love what this freaking Will Richardson kid has been doing for Fordham. Every time I bet on Fordham and I bet live on them, this guy comes through for me, even if Darius Quisenberry isn't. Now, Will Richardson is a guy that I trust to get to the free throw line. I just want to rein in some of his three-point shooting attempts that are quick in the shot clock and probably a little too projected. But what we've seen from Nowitzki, the Ukrainian, what we've seen from Khalid Moore, from Antros Charlton, it's just been exactly what Fordham needs. What did Darius Quisenberry come to this school for? Because he believed that this was a program on the rise. And Fordham is one of the rare A10 teams that I think is bettable. Now, Binghamton is definitely very nice, but do we know if McGriff's going to play or not? Because Jacob Falco cannot do it on his own, especially considering Fordham is a very good comeback team. They're one of my favorite teams to bet on live when they're down. And they got multiple guys there that hit over 70% from the free throw line. So you're not going to be able to come back on them or stop them from coming back on you if you're fouling and you're undisciplined. And that's one of the issues for Binghamton. Can they stop the fouls? Can they guard without fouling? I don't believe so. Now, I don't want to take Fordham first half. I think that when you look at that number at 7.5, if Binghamton is going to be competitive, we know that dogs are more competitive in first halves, but I'm just not feeling it. So I'm going to ride Fordham full game. I got 12.5 on them. I think that at the end of the day, it's a spot where I want to have some wiggle room to live bet just because I've seen them get down against Maine, have troubles against Harvard in the first half. But from a talent perspective, this is a mismatch, especially if Will Richardson comes back to play. So the one game that Fordham's had that you can say was a downfall was against Arkansas. But every time that they've gone up against competition that's in this range, it's been a double-digit win. So I expect another double-digit win. It's just a matter of, is it going to be 13 or 14 points, or is it going to be 10? I'll take the latter and roll with Fordham and respect the fact that they've owned home court and they're playing fantastic interior offensive basketball. So let's move on from there before I start sweating because I love Fordham that much. Let's talk about another game, Alabama A&M and Lipscomb. Now, I think that for Lipscomb, the biggest issue for me is how fast they can get Asadullah going offensively. He's obviously a guy that makes a big difference. And starting the season, he hasn't been his normal efficient self. Now, he looked good in a game against Navy, and I do think that Alabama A&M's defense provides a lot of the same opportunities, but you got to get balanced scoring, good point guard play from Will Pruitt, and with Jacob Ognisevich, he's got to be able to play with Hassan on the floor at the same time. Now, we've seen him put up some godly-ass numbers. Very efficient, very high percentage oriented, and very knockdown fucking safe at the free throw line. The guys are going to have the ball in their hands in the second half when it matters are guys that you can trust to knock them down. The question's going to be, can they build that lead big enough to withstand any kind of late run from Alabama A&M? With Trey Benham, with freaking Tommy Murr, with Grant Assman, you got some guys that you can fill those voids offensively from the bench. But you need defensive guard play, and that's where AJ McGinnis comes into the picture. This is a guy that you brought in to be a lockdown defender. He's done a decent job of that so far, but you need more, you need better. This is an opponent that he can do a ton of work at. Plus, he's also very familiar with Alabama A&M coming from the SWAC. Now, with Alabama A&M, Otis Hugley, he's got some problems. His team can't hit free throws. They can't defend the three. They can't stop anybody from driving. Their offense looks fucking discombobulated so often, but they do have an on-paper roster that should be better. They got a freaking very usable 7-footer in Akanabi in the middle, and you got guards and wing players like Messiah Thompson, Dalen Smith, and Garrett Hicks, and Cam Tucker that realistically should be able to score for you. The problem is this team is so 3-point happy, sometimes they forget to take other shots. I think that what they've been doing at the free throw line has not worked. I don't know why Dalen Smith has missed so many for a guy who gets there so flawlessly. But if you leave points at the free throw line versus the Bison, that could be the difference between covering and not. I think that this is a game where if you like Alabama A&M, you see how they match up first half and you ride them then. But I think that the Bison eventually figure it out, pound them inside so much that they got to freaking change their tactics defensively. You got to remember, outside of freaking AJ Williams and Akanabi, you don't have a ton of trustable freaking height there. And this is an Lipscomb team that's going to go inside a ton against you. So it seems like a bad matchup, but why isn't this number 12 or 13 then? So I think Alabama A&M definitely is going to be a bit of a mind fuck, I'd call it. Because if their 3-point defense is a sieve and giving up more than 10, then they got to be able to hit 3 for 3 versus this 3-point defense for Lipscomb, and I don't think that's possible. So moving on from there. When it comes to the first halves, it is important to note Alabama A&M, Lipscomb both have been lower scoring on the road. Lipscomb 30.5 points, Alabama A&M 29.5 points. So it is a possible spot to take a first half under, and that would be around 70.5 or 71. When it comes to Alabama A&M's first half scoring margin, that's where the problem for me laying with them on the first half is, because even at home, they're down 7.5 points on the first half in their small sample size, and Lipscomb hasn't been blowing anybody out early. So we'll see what happens. So it's an interesting game. It will definitely be on one of my screens. Let's move on to the next game, which is going to be one of the more boring games of the night. McNeese State versus Northern Iowa. I'm not really that impressed with this game. I think that with Northern Iowa, the thing that points and stands out to me is the fact that they're at home, where they're more comfortable, where they're more effective offensively. This could be a 12, 13-point lead for them at the half. Now, I'm not in love with freaking laying 9 points or 9.5 points with Northern Iowa, but I do see about 3 or 4 points of value on that line if you're looking at scoring margins and scoring outputs. Now, McNeese has definitely had trouble scoring lately. They've had scoring troubles all year long, and averaging 25.5 points on the road going against Northern Iowa, I don't really think that's going to really play into their hand and play into their favor. I think that the value definitely stands out with Northern Iowa first half more so than full game, because if they don't cover first half, then you have the opportunity to get on a better number early. So we'll see what happens. Not one of my favorite games on the board. All right, let's talk about the Twitter play that I'm on. Hold on, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Let me mute the mic. All right, that was disgusting. This is the game that I'm on for my Twitter play. Uh, Washington and Gonzaga. Now, for Washington, the numbers aren't flattering, but the matchup advantages that they have in the front court could be the difference in whether they cover or not tonight. Now, we all have seen Gonzaga play a pretty brutal schedule. They haven't had many cupcakes, and that's probably why they have 3 losses already on the year. But this very easily could turn into the game like they played against Portland State, like they played against North Florida in the opener on November 7th. But I just am I had so much trouble falling into that because what has been the downfall of Gonzaga's offense so far this year? Julian Strother. This is a guy who expected to be a lot better, a lot more consistent. And even though his numbers are very flattering when he's shooting 44% and 80% from the 3-point line, look at the losses and look at the performances in those losses. That's something that shouldn't be happening. I think that with Gonzaga, they can only give the ball to Drew Timme so many times. And with him, he's been a liability at the free throw line. I think tonight we see the best of Drew Timme. I think Drew Timme goes off for 20 points or more. I think that he is a handful for anybody that Washington puts on him down low. And if Braxton Mee gets into foul trouble, I'm really praying that Washington's offense doesn't fall apart. So I think that the value is with the double-digit dog. It's a tough place to go in and win and be able to pull off the outright upset. But this Gonzaga backcourt just has so much to prove to me. It just has so much to prove to me. Hitting an open jump shot is something you expect at this level. With Gonzaga, you can test that shit and they become way less efficient. So their open jump shots that they've hit from the 3-point line and from inside the arc are way higher than the ones that are contested and have good closeouts. So if you watch enough basketball and you use freaking some of these hoop lens sites, then you see these different shots and how they're working for and against them. And I just think that Gonzaga does not have that All-American guard. Malachi Smith and Rasir Bolton are serviceable upperclassmen collegiate players, but they are not the guys that are going to bring you home national championships. So I think that Washington, if they can bring their best tonight, they have all the opportunity in their freaking rear view mirror. They're a very good defensive efficiency team. They make you take difficult shots. They're a good 3-point defensive team. They do a good job of protecting the rim. I'm not a fan of Pac-12 teams, but with Braxton May and Keon Brooks, maybe you have Frank Kapanen back tonight. You got some very serviceable size to slow this game down and pound in. For me, when I look at the numbers, Washington on the road is only averaging 27 points per game. If they cannot exceed that today, they're fucked. They're fucked. With Gonzaga, like Iowa yesterday, who put up a big number, I think that there is value with Gonzaga putting up 40 points in this first half. So I'm not seeing the value in Washington first half as much as I'm seeing full game. They have to show offensively that they can compete and that they can score bucket for bucket. Gonzaga's averaged 37.5 points the last 3, 39.8 on the season, and 46.5 at home. You have to take that in consideration. I should have taken it into consideration yesterday with Iowa. I won't make the same mistake today. I think Washington is one of those teams that we see playing tales of two halves. The Seattle game was the first thing that came back to my memory, at least. So I'm going to ride with the big dirty dog, and I'm going to pray for fucking good things to happen. That's about it, I'm gonna talk to my God and be like, yo, Hashem, hook me up with a fucking winner, bro. Well, I need some chicken dinners. All right, let's talk about the last game. This is actually one of my favorite games on the board. I think that Arkansas State is in a position for the setup for the wet up, you know. I probably said that backwards, but yeah, set went up. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. Um, I think that this Air Force team is head and shoulders ahead offensively of where I expected them to be at the beginning of the season. Yes, they had a hiccup against Portland State, but being at home, seeing them put up 79 points, seeing them put up 81 points, seeing them put up freaking 83 points against USC Upstate, 75 against Delaware, 69 in an overtime loss against Commerce. You know, this team has shown that they are capable of getting those shots, scoring those points, and defying some of these totals that are insanely low. This is a team that, when you look at some of their freaking, I guess, 5 out of their 8 rotation players all shoot above 60% from the field. So there's some good passing going on in this Air Force Princeton style offense that is getting guys very good looks. When you have Jake Heidbreder shooting 40% with 26 3-point makes and 90% from the free throw line on 42 attempts, that's an Air Force team that you feel confident betting as a favorite. I was confident against South Dakota. I'm confident here. I think Arkansas State's offense looked terrible against two of the worst zone defenses in the nation. Now they're going to go and they're going to put up points against Air Force. I'm just not seeing it. Caleb Fields would have to have an exceptional game. And when you look at how Ethan Taylor, Carter Murphy, Corbin Green, Jeffrey Mills are all contributing, and then Camden Vanderswag and his 3-point shooting, it's just no. Air Force will lose games. There will be times to bet against Air Force. I just don't think that this is one of them. So I'm going to roll with what I view as a scheme advantage, a very good 3-point defense, a good rim defense, and an effective overall defense in Air Force. You know, this is a game that I don't know if they pay teams to play them, but it would definitely have that kind of endorsement, you know. Outside of Caleb Fields, who else is really going to beat you? Malcolm Farrington? I'm not scared of that. Avery Felts? No, I'm not scared of him either. And even if Omar El-Shaki gets to the gets scoring offensively, the dude shooting 47% from the free throw line has been there 20 plus times. I'm not sipping the Kool-Aid on Air Force, on Arkansas State. They had all the opportunities in the world to beat Central Arkansas on the road in a very big in-state game for them, and they fell flat in the second half. Central Arkansas came back on their ass and served them a nice cold bowl of cock soup. So listen, the number may have moved against me, but even right now at 5.5 or even 6 points, I still like Air Force. If I eat crow, I eat crow. But I'm riding with the Service Academy or whatever you want to call them. I also like the full game over in that game. And that's about it. All right. Let me see what else. Just looking at the lines for tomorrow. And that's it. Okay. I'm going to go and smoke some weed. I'm going to go fucking take a shower. And hopefully at 6 o'clock, Charles Pride and Earl Timberlake will score 15 points or more each for us. Later, players.